Good morning, America. Thank you for watching Taxes Made Easy. Sorry about yesterday. We had some technical difficulties, as in my internet company had an outage throughout the entire area. So I had zero access to the internet and found that out just 10 minutes before the show. But today we've got a great show talking about collection statute expiration dates, or when does my tax debt expire or become unenforceable? It's a very common topic that I get. I have touched on this before, but we're going to do a deep dive into it today. And we're going to talk about the ins and outs of tax debt becoming unenforceable. So again, thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast. And it's going to be an interesting show. We've got some important news to touch on today, mainly about the economy. And a lot of people, we're seeing what's happening in the economy, especially with gas prices. And the question is, what can we do about it? And how does this affect our tax returns? Hubert Johnson again. Thank you for back again with Taxes Made Easy on the Smart Money channel or culture.tv. So there's a lot in the news today. I'm going to try to get through it fairly quickly. The first article is townhall.com citing a New York Post article talking about office space in the Big Apple and also in other cities hitting record highs of availability, which means empty office space. This is something we're definitely seeing in areas like San Francisco, where a lot of businesses have just left downtown areas. Downtown Manhattan has been hit the worst, but the whole borough, their availability rate or office space that is unfilled went from 10% in 2020 to now 18% in 2021. So the problem is that when it gets to the point, just like any business, people that own real estate, they have a profit margin. They have, everything set up where they're profitable at this level, and as long as they're getting so much income in, they can afford these rents. They can afford to the mortgages on these properties. The problem is that when they can't afford it, they just walk away and say, look, can't do it. They'll file for bankruptcy, etc. They'll do what they need to do to walk away and stop paying not only the city, but the owners of the property. And that closes down huge sections. So again, we had here in Tucson, we had some office space locations closed down, and then it just drove, everybody was fleeing from offices that got closed down because they were struggling because of availability and just flooded the other office space. But this reduces the supply of office space and drives costs up. Again, we're seeing this as a trend. How can this affect you? In a couple ways. First of all, increase costs, unless fewer people renting office space means fewer government funds, which means cities and counties struggle with their budgets. And when you have huge places closed down, not only is there reduced shopping opportunities, but it affects the local economy. So the businesses that haven't shut down need to scramble to find something. It causes massive dislocations in the market, and it can affect a lot of banks that are financing these deals. So again, one of the big concerns is that we'll have another series of bank failures and need another TARP bailout like we had in 2008 and 9. That would be very, very expensive for a U.S. government we're very tapped out when it comes to finances. So it would be hard to come up with another few trillion when we're already spending $1.5 trillion more than we bring in every single year. Next article. This is from Fox Business talking about energy prices. This is something that's hitting everybody at the pump, unless you have an electric vehicle. But even then, it causes electric prices to go up. So it's not just petroleum products that's going up. It affects electric. It affects natural gas. Anything used to either heat your home provide for fuel. Any kind of energy that's produced is affected by the overall market. So again, this article goes through that there's been about a third increase across the board in the energy markets. Fuel, if you go out to the pump, it's about 50% higher now for just pumping your gas. But if you go to overall, it's 30% higher for overall energy costs, January 21 to March 2024. So, again, electricity's up 27.9%, gas is up around 52%, so it averages out. But again, diesel fuel's up 50%. Problem with all these costs is that they all get passed on. Oil, like it or not, is the #1 traded product in the world. And it goes into about everything that we consume or use today. So into food, delivering products. Everybody loves Amazon, but it's all about transporting products. They don't have brick and mortar stores, but they have to transport everything. And so again, when energy prices go up, who does it hurt the most? The poor. The people that are least available to afford increases in the cost of living. People on fixed incomes. So again, it does help people, hurt people across the board. Going with that, and again, if I'm talking about inflation a lot, it's because it's in our economy. It's hurting people out there. Again, I don't even know what the price of postage anymore is until I read this article, and this is a Breitbart article talking about the U.S. Postal Service announces the 6th price increase since 2020. So it's almost like a running joke. How much does it? I have no idea what the price of postage is anymore. If you have to mail stuff, you just bite the bullet and do it. But fewer people are mailing than ever before because the price keeps going up and up. It just increased from 68 cents to 73 cents for your typical first class stamp. Domestic and international went up as well as across the board proposed increase. And we see that's a 7.8 price increase being added to postage. And postage affects prices across the board, in communications. And again, those prices will be transferred on to other places, USPS, FedEx, or not USPS, but UPS, FedEx. As gas prices go up, you're going to see fees across the board going up, making it harder to deliver goods and services to people that need it across the country. Now, I wish I had some good news. This last one I think is important. This is from NBC News. And talking about, we have mentioned about the possible change to the child tax credit. People were holding off on file or thinking they need to hold off on filing their tax returns. Just file your returns. Get them in by the deadline. If you want to file an extension and wait and see what happens. But this just came out. And basically, so this came out yesterday. And the GOP, Republicans, are not willing to pass this bill that would expand the child tax credit. And they have their reasons for doing so. But the bill would expand the child tax credit and make it available to more people, lift a cap on refundability, adjusted for inflation, etc. With lots of benefits going to poor families. And then they threw in some business tax breaks, etc. So why aren't they for this? And so you need to look at both sides of the issue. They're not for it because it gets rid of weakens the work requirement. It's got a adds to the deficit again, which is a huge problem. There's a problem with the look back period that will allow people to use different years of income to get a higher tax credit. And so there's some, what happened is this bill passed through the House and only 70 members of the GOP voted against it. So it was a bipartisan bill. But pretty much the moderate Republicans with the Democrats passed this to spend more money and get more money out. But we're already spending way beyond our means. So is it good to pass more tax breaks and help the poor out, especially with what they're going? Yes, but if you just help the poor out and don't help the economy, the government giving or helping people out without any actual changes to the economy and actual production in the economy only hurts people, and it only increases the tax deficit. So um, I would probably benefit, well, I might benefit from an increase in the tax bill or a tax credit, but is it something that's really good for our country? And I think that's what we need to be asking ourselves more and more. Is this going to help the overall economy? Because a tax credit for a couple of years sounds good, might feel good, but really is it going to help make for a better economy and country for our kids coming after us? And too often the answer is no. When we take a long-term approach, unless we do something about this national debt, our children are going to have a much worse experience than us. And I don't think that's fair. That's my frustration. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. Went through a lot of different news, what's going on in the economy. Don't hold your breath for that tax break. It very well might not pass at all. And for various reasons, if you want to get into it, the NBC article, it's a lot more partisan than I mentioned. But again, you have to get to the end of the article to read why it's being opposed. And you have to take a step back and look at the larger economic picture. And I think too often they just throw out a little bit of tax breaks, saying, look, it's going to help corporations, but what we really need to do is change how the government regulates and deals with the economy, because right now inflation is still up. Expenses, cost of living is up and continue to climb. And unless we do something about that, any little tax break is it's just a throwing a pebble into a pond. It's not going to do much to help people. It just feels good. And you have politicians saying, look, we're helping you, while they hurt you in much worse ways. So again, I think we need real change. And again, it's across the board, both parties. The GOP is not innocent by any means when it comes to this. So we're going to switch gears and just introduce the topic for today before the break. So it's called the collection statute expiration date. And we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about what is a collection statute expiration date. Does tax debt actually expire? And the answer is yes, it actually does. The question is, when does it expire? And we're going to talk about how to look at your transcripts, how to determine and understand what will affect when your tax debt will expire. So we'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to be talking about when does tax debt expire today. So the real question is, and to kind of put it in layman's terms, how long can the IRS come after me for my taxes? So we're going to share. This is directly from irs.gov. You can find a lot of information on irs.gov. When you go to other sites, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And the irs.gov, it is biased. It has a lot of information, but it is biased, from the perspective of the IRS. So in general, but they do have a lot of, like I said, good information as well. This is an important phrase that you need to know, or should know, is the C said, collection statute expiration date. And this is the IRS's date for when tax debt will expire. So just like a statute of limitation, the IRS only has so much time to come and collect taxes. So if you can't, I lost my train of thought. They can only come after you for this 10-year period, but it's not exactly 10 years. And so if you can't pay, getting in on a hardship status or a low installment agreement might be the way to go and letting this statute expiration date expire. Especially since this administration has made it harder than ever to qualify for an offer in compromise. So there are plenty of people that still qualify. We're still doing offers in compromise, but it is harder than ever at this time period to go through the entire process for an offer. So many times looking at alternatives can help you out, especially where you don't qualify now. Or you can do a hardship status, and hopefully a different administration changes the rules. If they change them back to the way that they were prior to this administration, a lot of people that don't qualify for an offer now very well might qualify to do an offer in compromise, and you just need to buy some time. So that is one strategy that we're employing, is buying our time, seeing what happens in the future, but protecting them from any collection actions here and now. So one of the key things here, and I have people come to me all the time, I haven't filed in 15 years, I haven't filed in 10, someone just came to me, said I haven't filed since 2013. The very first thing I tell them, don't file further back than 2018, unless the IRS has already filed for you. So we're gonna break out a chart as we talk about it, but I'm gonna talk about the basic issues. So when you file your tax returns, let's say right now everybody's filing 2023. If you file your tax return timely, it's due by April 15th of 2023. When will that tax year expire? It's roughly 10 years from the date that you file your tax return. So, or when the tax debt gets assessed. So if you file by April 15th, it's going to take the IRS a little bit of time to process. If you do it electronically, let's say May 15th. It gets processed, assessed to your case. That's May 15th of 2024. So your 23 return doesn't get assessed till 24 because you can't file in the same year because the year hasn't finished. So it's always the next year later, and 10 years from that would be May of 2034. And then the problem is if you don't file timely, or let's say halfway through this time period, the IRS does either you don't file and they file for you, or they do an examination. Once they do an examination, then new balances are assessed, and it extends out how long the IRS can go to. So we just did a case they owed from 2008, 2009, and 2013. The taxpayer never filed original returns. As so far as the IRS came in 2013 and filed for them. And then they did an examination in 2018 that drastically increased the balances. Because the examinations weren't done until 2018, they're saying the balances aren't going to expire until 2028, going back 20 years. Now we're going to be contesting this and making sure that they followed their process and respected the dates, because again, they have limits to when they should be doing this. And if they didn't, we're going to have them change those CSEDs. You can contest it, you can fight this. So again, we're going to kind of slow walk this through this. So when you file your return, the original tax amounts on your tax return start the 10 years. When you amend your return, any additional taxes start the 10 years for that. So let's say you file your original return for 23, you do it timely and you owe $10,000. And then in 3 years, you amend your return. And again, now you owe another $10,000. You discover something was wrong, you shouldn't have claimed as many credits, etc. You file an amended return. So the initial $10,000, that starts running in 2024, but the additional $10,000 doesn't start running until 3 years from now when it gets amended in 27. So that's why it's important to do accurate tax returns when you file your returns. So when they file a substitute for return for you, which means they come in and they file the worst way possible, and we're going to talk about that. Audits, civil penalties are filed. So whenever these penalties, ongoing penalties and interest that are just due to the taxes being owed, go away with the tax debt, the underlying tax debt. But if there are civil penalties, and then other penalties that aren't directly connected to the underlying tax debt, that can be assessed, and they can start their own CSED as well. So we've been talking a lot about the IRS. With the states, it varies. Typically, it's 10 years till the taxes become unenforceable. That's the language they use. And it's based on tax liens. So there's still a debt out there even after it becomes unenforceable, but they can't do anything about it. They can't collect on you. Essentially, it becomes unenforceable, and they stop trying to collect on it. And they can apply refunds to this unenforceable debt, etc. It has to be legally enforceable. But on older tax debt, they'll always take your money if you want to pay on debt that's either expired. The IRS really doesn't know what to do with that, though. If you just give them money and they're not showing a balance, the states will definitely take your money. So when you are talking to the IRS, how do you find out what your CSED is? There's a couple ways. So one of the best ways is looking at your transcripts. So you can go online, create your own online account, and you can look at a transcript on there. So you want to look at the account transcripts. There's many different kinds of transcripts, and we're going to open up this example just further down. So you're going to see a lot of code. There's a code for pretty much everything on here that tells the IRS how it affects their system. So some of them tax return filed, here's the balance, W-2 or withholding payments. So these are the payments against it. And then they got a penalty. So the total balance is they owed $7,000, got a $100 credit, but then got hit with a $50 penalty. So now they owe $6,950. And this date under here is what tells you what the collection statute expiration date is. So this tells you roughly when this tax debt is going to expire. When was this filed? In 2012. And this is fictional. This is just made up. So it's filed in 12. When should you expect it to file and go away? 2012 or 2022. Around May of 2023, because this is when it was assessed. Now, so they just made up a number here, but different things can extend out. the CSED. So what can extend it out? And we're going to talk about this in detail. And then we're going to show in charts how this applies and hopefully make it a little bit more easy to understand. So this is a new one that they have been enforcing like crazy. Whenever you request an installment agreement, some people will just ask for an installment agreement, let it expire, and try to buy that time that way. Because people play this game so much, the IRS has really started enforcing this within the last administration. It suspends out the CSED. If you withdraw or they reject the installment agreement, then it's extended out for another 30 days afterwards, because that allows the IRS to get back on track, get back into collections. If you appeal the decision, the CSED is suspended throughout the entire appeal process. So, true story on this. We were hired to represent someone. It's a fairly large case, around $800,000 in liability. I think it was closer to $1 million. And $400,000 was about to expire in just a month or two. So we got on the case. We reached out to the revenue officer. We started negotiating. And we thought everything was going fine. We were trying to set up something, and then the revenue officer said, "Oh, well," I said, "Well, those balances, were passed when the expiration date. It should have gone away." And he said, "Oh, no, it hasn't." I said, "Why not?" And he told me that the clients had called them just before hiring us, that in that conversation they had requested an installment agreement, which would extend out and suspend the expiration date. I called the clients. I said, "Did you request an installment agreement?" They said, "No, we never did anything of the sort. We didn't know what he was talking about." This is a clear example of a revenue officer setting up a he said, she said situation. He said, "Well, I thought they wanted this. I thought they asked for this." And they're saying, "No, we didn't understand what was going on." And because they didn't document the call, they didn't document what was said in the call, they had nothing to stand on. So this is something I took to the manager and regional manager, and I actually filed a report against the revenue officer here, because this is them playing a fast one, abusing taxpayers' rights and taking advantage of someone that just called and spoke directly to a revenue officer. So they complain all the time and say that, look, people don't need tax professionals. This is a classic example of why you need a tax professional, to make sure the IRS doesn't take advantage of you in the situation. The tax debt did eventually expire, but instead of expiring in May, it didn't expire until September, and that gave the revenue officer time to go on and take further collection actions. But that's why you need to be proactive in moving the case forward to resolve it. They still owe $600,000, so it's not like the problem just went away. One thing that it definitely extends it out is filing for bankruptcy. Now, this continue when you file for bankruptcy. First of all, if you have older tax debt, this could be a great resolution for you. How much older? 2 to 3 years older. And you need to talk to a local bankruptcy attorney, because the bankruptcy laws are different in every bankruptcy district across the country. But as long as that bankruptcy hold is on there, the IRS has to throw their hands up and say, we can't do anything. So once the bankruptcy is discharged or closed out, then another 6 months are added. And the IRS is really bad about taking cases out of bankruptcy holds. They've gotten a little better about it, but there's times where we've seen a case still sitting in bankruptcy. They couldn't do anything a year later or more. So it is really important that when you are trying to resolve the case, that you work with them to get that bankruptcy hold removed and then negotiate with them. because the longer this hold is going, the longer the CSET is being pushed out and your 10 years is not running. If you file an offer in compromise, there are plenty of people that file an offer in compromise just to file. And one thing an offer in compromise does is that it suspends your expiration date for the time that it's being, the offer hold is on the case, and then adds on 30 days. If you appeal the case, that continues to suspend the expiration date. So while an offer in compromise is great, it's a wonderful resolution for many people. If you don't qualify, you're just hurting yourself. And especially when we have debts that are coming up and expiring within a short period of time, it makes a lot more sense. It can often make more sense to just let the debts expire rather than go through an offer in compromise process. When you request any kind of appeals, collection due process hearings, cap appeals, you request innocent spouse relief, anytime they cannot collect from you, if you're in a combat zone, and the military and certain types of services. So I have seen where someone was in the military, they were overseas in a combat zone, and the IRS suspended it for 10 years. So they were trying to collect 20 years after a debt was initially assessed. And if you're living continuously outside the IRS for 6 months or more, that can definitely affect it. So then it talks about different statutes of limitations, and there's more information here if you want to go into that. When can they file it or assess a debt? So as far as a levy, all this is stopped while you're doing this, while their CSET is suspended. If the IRS tries to do a levy or take a wage garnishment while things are suspended, then you can get that released right away. So as far as an SFR, we're going to take a deep dive into the article, but we're coming up on another break, and so we're gonna do some charts, kind of lay it out a little bit easier so you can see as far as a timeline what it looks like, and then we're going to talk about the IRS filing for you and why you want to prevent that. In most cases, it absolutely makes sense to file your own original return. It absolutely makes sense to get that information, comply with your tax responsibilities, and get that clock running if you can't afford to pay it. Set up some kind of resolution and get that time running. So if you have questions on that, give us a call, 520-485-7371. There are particular strategies that you can use the CSET to your favor. So just want to share real quick a story. And I've shared this before, but I called the IRS up to set up an installment agreement for someone. They owed around $25,000. As I went through the case and just got the details of the case, $15,000 was ready to expire in about a week. I said, great, let's set up the installment agreement on the $10,000 that's not going away. And the IRS hopped up and down, and he got upset and he said, no, you have to pay this within a week. I said, well, that's great. I'll call you back in 2 weeks, and I hung up. Called back in 2 weeks, set up the installment agreement on the $10,000 without a problem. Once it expires, again, it becomes legally enforceable. And as you have tax debts coming up, they'll try to get you to pay. They'll try to think that you have to pay, but it's your legal right, once it expires, to just ignore it. And it falls off their systems anyway. So we'll be right back after a short break and continue the conversation. Welcome back, everybody. I got a little carried away. We're going to try to break this down a little bit, and to do that, we're going to go ahead and share whiteboard again and just kind of walk through some examples. So this is very basics of collection statute expiration dates. Now, this is important to understand. One, just to understand when your tax debt's going to go away, if you're on a low payment plan or if you're in a hardship status, when does the tax debt go away? But also, this also helps explain when you should, another reason why you should file your original tax return. So let's say if you file your tax debt on time, April 15th, 2023, and then nothing else happens for 10 years if you don't pay it, or you only pay part of it, it should expire by April 15th, or when the debt is actually assessed, probably early May of 2033. Pretty simple, right? This is where it gets fun. So let's say 3 years in, the IRS decides to do an exam. So if they go ahead and do an exam 3 years in, then the expiration date starts running from here all the way out to 3 years past. So the increase, so let's say, and just let's say you owed $10,000 when you filed your original return. The exam comes in and says, no, now you owe 20. So if you owe 20,000, my wonderful handwriting with the mouse, what expires here? The original 10,000 goes away here. And then the increase from this goes away, right here. So this would be 2033. No, actually, I just messed that up. This would be, you file this in 24, and this would be 34. Now, if they did an exam at 3 years, that would extend this out to 37. So typically the IRS says 3 years from when you file your original return to do an examination. What happens if you don't do an examination? So let's say this is when the tax debt was due. We're going to change this to due. Tax debt due. And we're going to change this from an exam to an SFR. So the IRS comes in and they file a tax return for you in the worst way possible. Same thing if they assess 20,000 here, it goes up to 37 years. But what if it doesn't happen? They're not limited by 3 years. If you never file an original return, this deadline could be all the way out here at 5 years, which means this didn't start running until over here, and it doesn't extend out, it extends out until 2039. So that's when it expires. So that's how, if you don't file your original return, clean this up a little bit, it can extend this out much, much further. So in this case, we just pulled this up. He never filed the original return. The IRS filed for him in the worst way possible, about 5 years out. And then all the way up here at about 10 years out, well, it was usually really about year 9. Year 9, they did an audit. So they did the SFRs and said, hey, we're missing even more. We can make it even worse for him. So because they filed the audit all the way out here, guess what? So if they said 220,000 owed here, this first number never started running. So here on this one, 20,000 would start here when it's first assessed. The IRS had all this time to collect on it. So this 20,000 will still go away 15 years after the original date. So we go from 24 all the way until 39. But out here in this case, this is kind of a horror situation. They did an audit at 9 years afterwards. So this is year 33. And that 10 years starts again from here on the increase. So in this case, they said, okay, Now they owe 300,000. Now what's the increase from the 20,000 to 300? It's 280,000. That is going to go 10 years from 2033 out to 43. So 2043 is when the audit amount will expire. So roughly just shy of 20 years. An example that we shared was 2008 and 9 and 13. 2008 and 9 are not scheduled to expire until 2028. So in this case, he didn't file his original return. The IRS filed for them and then did an audit and drastically increased the balance. But the 20,000 will still go, the original 20,000 from the SFR. The IRS already had time to take a bite at this apple. So this will go away. 20,000 will go away here. And then 280,000, the difference will still be active until 2043. That's not a little scary. It should be. So the important thing is get your returns filed, get that clock running. I want to touch on one other thing. When I did that chart for an offer and compromise, that matters too, because the longer the IRS has to collect, when I did this highly dandy chart, the easier it is for them to hit RCP. We talked about that at length the other day. So again, be very aware that if you have, if you're going all the way out to 10 years or something like that for an offer analysis, it's that much easy for them to stretch this out and just let those, what you could pay over time, stretch out. Remember, the original offer is only 12 months or 1 year, or 24 if you're doing a lump sum. But to see if they can reject it, they stretch it out all the way out till the expiration dates. So again, understanding the collection statute expiration date, just think of it as they have 10 years to go after a certain debt. And if more debt gets piled on, that 10 years starts running for that new debt. Unless if it's just ongoing penalties and interest, that doesn't extend out the statute date. When a tax debt falls off, all the penalties and interest that were directly connected to that tax debt fall off as well. And that includes for penalties and interest, even civil penalties. The exception is fraud. Fraud debt does not go away for 40 years. So when I've seen people that pled out to avoid criminal prosecution, etc., sometimes they didn't even think they were guilty, but they pled out to avoid, possible jail time, and that usually cannot do an offer and compromise on fraud. It's not allowed, and you can't. You can do a hardship status, or you can do a large payment plan, but those are really your only two options, and it's going to be around for 40 years. So that is a much scarier scenario. You want to avoid fraud at all costs, but this is what happens when you don't file your return. Get that clock running, making sure you're not doing frivolous appeals, you're not requesting installment agreements just to buy time, and beware of taxpayers that are constantly doing that. I've had people ask me and say, look, we just need to buy some time here and wait for the market to turn around, wait for housing to improve. Usually it takes the economy much longer to turn around than people expect. There's exceptions to it. Bitcoin has gone up quite a bit this last year, but the market in general has stagnated. And Bitcoin and digital currencies are very volatile. So it's hard to understand and see where those are going. So key takeaways here. Get your tax returns filed. Get that process started, kicking the can down the road and hoping the IRS never finds you more and more is going to be, the IRS is going to be on top of that. They're more aggressive than ever. Anytime anything's filed with them, mortgage interest deduction, if you have a house, if you have any kind of business, people are paying you a 1099 or a W-2. There's a lot of information that gets reported to the IRS, and we're probably going to dive into SFRs more tomorrow and how that's processed. That's a whole nother issue there that gets pretty in depth, um, and how that can impact your case. Can you fight that by filing an original return? Absolutely. But you've got to get in there. The sooner you do that, when you do file an original return, that doesn't change the CSAT. So again, if you're filing original returns much later, then that clock starts over again. So if you have questions, has my tax debt expired? If it's older, you can go online to irs.gov, pull your transcripts, check out the date on the CSAT, or you can just give us a call and we can review any transcripts or letters for you if you're confused. Or we can give you some good advice. And again, we have a nominal fee just to get into your account, see what's going on, and let you know what's assessed, what do you have to worry about, and clear up things for you. And most firms will do that for a nominal amount, so $500 to $1,500, just to get in there, review your account, and tell you exactly what's going on. But again, that irs.gov is very handy. I do recommend using that to get some simple questions answered. And if, I tell people all the time, hey, if you can figure this out and set up your irs.gov account and just answer some questions yourself, becoming more familiar with your tax responsibilities and how to get good information it can be very worthwhile for you, to give you peace of mind for you and your family. Now, we've had hundreds of cases where tax debt has expired. People have been able to move on with their lives, and find that peace of mind. So letting tax debt expire is not a bad strategy. It often is the best strategy for taxpayers if you have older tax debt. If your tax debt is newer and you've got 10 years left for the IRS to collect on you, you might want to look at a different kind of strategy. Or if you just need a hold on your case and just let that start to run, or until your situation improves. That's what a lot of people are doing right now, given the economy, given that things are tight. Again, if you have further questions, you just want us to review letters, we do that for free. Just call us at 520-485-7371. You can reach us at guardiantaxlaw.com or info@guardiantaxlaw.com as our general email for anybody just looking for information. So tomorrow, we're going to step into and really talk about substitute for returns. The IRS is pretty nasty in how they go about it. They take any information that will hurt you and they ignore any information that will help you. But the states are even worse. The states will make up numbers. And again, more states are starting to do that and pick up from the examples of California and other states that are doing that. So be careful. Don't forget about your state returns, and we're going to talk about how to close it off so states don't do that to you years after you've moved away, which is happening more and more. So again, it'll be a lot of information, good and helpful information on how to prevent being surprised by the IRS or state filing a tax return for you. Again, if you have any questions, reach out to us. Hope you have a great weekend. And just one final story. That was my April Fool's story that I've told before, but gal had a case before the DOJ. About $600,000 was just pending, working with the DOJ. And as soon as we negotiated and resolved her case with the Department of Justice, about $600,000 just expired, went away because it was being extended out by the hold. So the balances that were settled with the DOJ, those had the 40 years on it, but the other $600,000, so that was about $200,000 that with the DOJ. The other $600,000 expired. Called her up on April 1st, not thinking about it. I'm not a huge prankster. And told her the good news. And she got mad at me. Didn't believe it, thought I was pulling an April Fool's joke on her, and she said she'd already been pranked that day already. But again, we pulled the transcripts, pulled her account transcripts, highlighted where it said it was expired, and submitted that to her. So when your tax debt expires, not only can you find the CSET on your transcripts, but you can also see when it expires. It actually says the account balance is written off due to expiration and gives you the date that it's actually expired and unenforceable. So get that information, get that peace of mind. And if you're confused or need help, just give us a call. Again, we offer a free consultation to help people out and help you breathe easy at night again. So many people tell me they can't sleep at night, do this. There's no reason to deal with the stress. Let's deal with it head on and resolve it for you and your family.